Hello and welcome back to Jimbo's PC Builds. Today I'm going to do another PC build video. But today's video is going to be a little bit different on two fronts. Firstly, it's going to be my first ever micro ITX build. Secondly, instead of doing the usual introduction, build montage, etc., I'm going to give the introduction to the build. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to walk through the build that I've already done and basically go through the lessons that I learned. Reason being is, with it being such a small form factor, getting really good footage of the build is actually reasonably difficult. So I thought instead of doing that, I'd mix it up a little bit and walk you through what I learned from doing the build. So before actually starting the build, I thought to myself, if I'm going to do a micro ITX build in the current climate, what would I put in it? And then I thought, hey, my son's going to college. So what I thought I'd do is I'd do a perfect portable micro ITX build that a student could take to college, have in their dorm, etc. But in the current climate, with the GPUs being priced as they are and some of the components being priced as they are, I thought I didn't want to break the bank, because if it's a build for a student, they may not have the biggest budget for it. But I still wanted to be able to, the build to be able to do basic functions, so they still want to be able to work on it. But they also might want to do some light gaming, like Rocket League or something like that. So let's have a look at the parts I was going to put in the build and see what you think. So with the whole idea of having a build that wasn't going to break the bank, but you still needed graphics, I went for one of the new Ryzen 5 CPUs. It's the 5600G, which includes integrated graphics. It's better than the Intel offering in terms of graphics wise, and it's able to do some light gaming, and it's still a pretty good CPU. They lose a little in terms of IPC, instructions per clock, compared to, say, the non-G version, so say the 5600X, but it's still a damn fine CPU, and it's reasonably well priced as well. Motherboard wise, with going for micro ITX, they're not the cheapest, unfortunately. They tend to be more expensive because of the smaller form factors. They have to cram all kinds of stuff on there. So I had to sort of compromise a little bit on price because I wanted to keep features, especially the likes of Wi-Fi, what would be very important for somebody in a dorm. So the motherboard I went for is the MSI B550i Gaming Edge Max Wi-Fi. Bit of a long title, but the motherboard is crammed full of features. It's got M.2 drive capabilities. It's got 2 RAM slots, which is very important. But as I mentioned earlier, it's got Wi-Fi. But it also includes all the latest USB features and decent sound built in. So it's really, really good. It did cost a little bit more than I wanted to originally pay. But as I mentioned, I had to compromise a little bit in terms of price to part, because you need to make sure you've got all the features. RAM-wise, I've gone for 3200 RAM. As you can see, it doesn't include much bling. It's a very basic set. As you'll see later in the video, I was very conscious of buying a set of RAM that was too high, because any micro ITX build, you've got to worry about cooler clearance. So this is the RAM I went for. Storage wise, I just went for an SSD, purely because you can pick up a reasonably priced 1 terabyte drive, which should be able to do everything that you need. So that's what I went for, and I thought, why not? That's what we'll put in. The power supply I went for is a Cooler Master V550. There's a few reasons I went for the V550. Firstly, it's not overly expensive. 2, it's fully modular, which means I didn't have to worry about as much cable clutter in such a small form factor case. And 3, at 550 watts, it's still got pretty good power. And if I wanted to have a graphics card in the future, it would be able to handle it. So they're the reasons I went for this power supply. Because, any student wants that little bit of cheap pizzazz, I went for some Lan fans, which is the 3-pack comes with a controller. Put them in there, it'll look really nice, put a bit of a light show on, and you're not breaking the bank in doing so. And also, they're actually pretty good performance when it comes to cooling. CPU cooler, I stuck with the AMD stock cooler for now. As you'll see in the build video, that presented certain challenges. But I'll get to that in a later point. But without further ado, let's have a look at the build and see what my thoughts were and what lessons that I learned. Okay, let's get to it. So as you can see, I managed to put the build together. The fans go on a bracket which goes on the side, and as I mentioned earlier, there's not a lot of cables coming from them because they daisy chain together, which is really nice, and they look really good with this case. you can see you've got the CPU in and the memory, and if you look really closely you can see that the CPU fan is actually hitting the memory. One thing to consider when you're doing an ITX build is you need to get memory that's as low as you can get. I bought this RAM specifically because I thought it was low enough, but after putting it in, it wasn't quite low enough. The NR200 has a nice little set of Velcro strips that hang below the PSU, which is really nice because, as you can see, I was able to bundle all the cables and tuck them away nicely over here out the way, so the airflow wasn't really impeded. Anything else, it came out really nicely. I mentioned in my introduction about using a modular power supply. I think it's pretty essential because in a build this size, if you're using a non-modular power supply, the extra cables will be a nightmare to deal with. As it is, there's not a lot of cables in there because you're only looking at the 24-pin power and the CPU power, and that's it. So that's pretty much the only cables. Sorry, there is a SATA cable as well that go into the front, but again, that goes to the front where I've got the storage, and I've also got the Lan fan hub. One of the things I really liked about these cases is there's a section at the front where you put the storage, and I was able to put the fan controller in there as well, so it's nicely tucked away. That's why it looks so spacious in here. As you can see, there's plenty of space for a graphics card, and in a future video I'm going to probably put a graphics card in this. Also, I'm going to change the storage option over because I've only got one hard drive in the front at the moment. I'm going to add an M.2 drive to see how easy it is, and I'm also going to change the cooler over. I'm going to try putting a Lan cooler in there. So basically I'm going to turn this from a student build into kind of like a portable LAN party stroke gaming build instead, just to see, you know, if the case is able to handle that with a graphics card, etc, etc. But as it is, with just the CPU and the RAM, etc, and the storage, there's plenty of room in this case. I've powered it up. The airflow is really good from the fans that's in there. It's an excellent case. Alright, so if you've got any questions about the challenges that I had with the ITX build, let me know, and I'll let you know my conclusions now. So that was my quick ITX build in the NR200. The NR200 itself, I didn't do a review of this case because there's so many reviews out there. The likes of Hardware Canucks did a really good review of it. I'll leave that in the description box below. But I'd have to say it was an excellent case to build in considering its size. I didn't find that the case hindered me in any way. If you follow the details instructions on how to take the case parts away from each other when you're putting the components in, it is very, very simple. It's a well illustrated set of instructions and it really, really helps. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below. If you've got any questions about an ITX build, or if you've done an ITX build and you've got a, in a different case, you want to share your experiences, etc., with the community, that'd be great. Please subscribe. Subscribers are becoming exceedingly hard to come by in the YouTube environment by now, and it'd be worth doing so because, as I kind of alluded to in the build section of this video, I'm going to be putting different storage, a different cooler, and a graphics card in this case to see, adding all that extra volume in there, will it work with this case, and how much of a bad or good experience it was with this case. So keep an eye out for that video. Please toss a like on the video, give it a good thumbs up because that will help with the old metrics on YouTube. And as always, take care.